Thanks, Ms. McAvelli, for the presentation. My first question is on energy prices. We know, and it's been a big political issue, that they've quadrupled in very recent months. But can Crew explain why the prices are so much higher than the EU average? And I have a couple of figures here. For example, in 2019, the price of gas to the household was 12% above the EU average, and electricity was 11% above. And in 2021, they were both 18% above the EU average. And is it related to the high level of profits that during the same period the providers accrued? So, for example, ESB Networks, their operating profit of 206 million was up by 74 million on the same period last year. Electricity operating profits up from 20.4 million by 16.4 million for the first 6 months. Energia grew their profits by 45% to 28.8 million from 19.2 million the previous year. And Hunstown Power, which operates one of the 2 plants at the site, trebled its profits to 15.4 million. So can you explain how that happens and if those 2 things are connected? And my second question, if I have time for it, is on, well, just a quick one for you. We discussed it this morning briefly. The energy review that's been promised by the state, has Crew got a role in that? What is your role and where is that energy review at? And then the second question is on data centres. In your presentation on data centres, you say that data centres need to take practical measures if the application is to go ahead. So can you tell me what exactly those practical measures are? Is it, for example, to have a purchasing power agreement with a wind farm, or the capacity to use their own gas-fired generator? And how many connections have EirGrid made to data centres over the last period of time, and how many will they make over the next year? We're still not clear what's going to happen in terms of the proliferation of data centres. So if you could answer those, please. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Deputy. Ms. McAvelli.
Thank you, Deputy Smith. I'll start off with the issue of energy prices, and firstly I'll start by acknowledging just how difficult it is for customers at the moment. We're keenly aware that energy prices are putting huge pressure in many households and indeed businesses across the country. This is something that is a critical concern for CRU. I think the circumstances at the moment are unprecedented, driven by wholesale gas prices largely, and we will continue to work with government, with other stakeholders, to see what we can do to support energy customers in the current difficult time. I think, though, you're looking back more at the trends in energy prices over time. So yes, what we typically find over time, looking at the Eurostat prices, is that Irish prices tend to be above the euro area, or sorry, above the EU average, but trending closer to the euro area average. And you will see that there is a significant differential between prices in different parts of the EU, actually a recent ACER study, so that's the Agency for Cooperation of Energy Regulators, looking at price trends across the EU, highlighted that for member states such as Ireland, which are at the periphery of the European markets, which are less well interconnected than the Central European markets, and which are highly dependent on gas, there would tend to be higher prices. And I think in general, what you would see us as being effectively at the end of a pipeline. So not only are we paying the commodity price, let's say for gas in this case, but we're also paying for the transport costs of bringing gas across interconnectors and into our own gas network. So we would tend to have, as you say, above EU area prices, and that has been the trend, but closer to euro area averages, so not beyond, I suppose, what other euro area countries are experiencing, and particularly those ones with similar features, let's say, to our market, geographically distant, highly, dependent on imports. In relation to profits of energy companies, so these can change over time. It is difficult to pick up trends in looking at any particular period. You could have a high increase in profitability because there was a low profit number in a previous period. We have no evidence to suggest that current or indeed previous prices are related to, let's say, excess profits in the sector. It is a competitive sector, so it is, I suppose, where companies make investments and look to incur costs associated with generating electricity or supplying electricity, they would generally expect to make some return on that. I might just check if colleagues want to add to that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't add much to that other than to say that the Deputy is correct that the price of the raw materials in electricity generation have increased very dramatically over the last year. The price of gas would be broadly 6 times more towards the end of last year what it had been the previous year. And on average, the price that consumers saw the increase over the year was close to around a 25% increase on the typical domestic bill. And what I would add to what Ms. McEvely said is the weighted average price of electricity, which is a figure that SEAI publish twice yearly. When that figure is used, the weighted average price of electricity in Ireland tends towards that euro area average. Other averages, other sectors, other figures can be quoted from Eurostat, which tend to focus on a particular sector in one country versus a particular sector in the other country. Those sectors can be of different sizes and of different levels of importance in the different countries. This is why SEAI published this weighted average figure. So we would track that figure. That figure is available and visible, and the price in Ireland tends towards the euro area average. That's it.
Thank you.
Can I come back in on that, Chair, please, just very briefly? Don't we still use quite a chunk of our gas supply comes from Corrib? And this argument about having to pay for transport doesn't stack up when it's coming from Corrib. Could you return to that? And I mean, your answers are very convoluted. And for ordinary people, including ordinary TDs like me, to try and understand why you are separating the idea of a rise in profits away from the rise in the cost of energy to the consumer. I think maybe if somebody could just briefly go over that again, because I've given you the evidence, I'm not making up these figures, that profits have risen and prices have risen. And are those two things not connected?
Thank you, Deputy. Just on the issue of Corrib gas, so gas is an internationally traded commodity, and when Corrib gas came online, it was basically pricing against the delivered cost of gas via Moffat. So it wasn't pricing at cost, it was pricing at a commodity price, which is linked to the price deliverable from the UK national balancing point to Ireland. So that is why Corrib gas may offer some marginal reduction to support sales in Ireland, but it is not necessarily offering, you know, very significantly cheaper gas. I think we would have always promoted Corrib gas as supporting security of supply for Ireland rather than necessarily delivering very major changes in energy prices. It is priced in the same way that all commodity suppliers would price their product. Just in relation to the profitability, so again, I suppose we do look from time to time at I think there's a report done on the single electricity market monitoring unit, which looks at generator profitability over time. And there is a report that we would take from time to time looking at supply margins. And what I would say is, again, we're looking at it not at any one point of time or for any 1 6-month period, but over time, if there is any indication of a trend that would be of concern, as you say, of increasing profitability, potentially driving customer prices. So what I was saying was there was nothing that we were seeing in any of those reports. Now, again, some of these may be not up to the very current moment, but there was nothing we were seeing there that would indicate that profitability, if you like, or an increase in profitability is impacting on the current level of pricing, which again is largely driven by commodity prices. I think another question you asked was on the energy review, which I take to mean the security of supply review that the department is undertaking. So it is very much driven by the department, and we are available as advisors to the Minister to provide input to that at any time. So I think that answers that question. And then on data centres, I'll turn again to Jim Gannon, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Smith. In terms of the measures the data centres might take, our direction before Christmas provided ESB Networks and EirGrid with some assessment criteria that might incentivise or might encourage data centres to take certain actions. So the expectation there would be that EirGrid would look at the location of the proposed data centre connection and see is that in a constrained or pressurised area. But then in terms of the things that the data centres could bring to the table, it would be along the lines of perhaps moving the economic activity, the data processing, to other facilities they may have. And this is something, again, that they do in other jurisdictions. Separately, it could be to reduce activity at periods of time, at peak demand, and to offer up that flexibility to the grid operator. Or separately, to utilise on-site energy storage or on-site energy generation to allow the grid to experience a reduction in demand from the site. So there are a range of actions there the data centres could offer up alongside their grid connection application and in dialogue with EirGrid. In terms of the numbers of connection offers that have been processed or completed by EirGrid, I don't have those numbers to hand. They're numbers that EirGrid would have to hand since the direction. What I would say is that EirGrid are currently in the early stages of updating their 2022 generation capacity statement, which projects the amount of demand they expect to see over the next 10 years, and also projects the amount of generation they expect to see over the next 10 years. And in some of that modelling would be their expectation and their updated expectation of what data centre demand would look like in the coming 10 years. And underpinning that would be their understanding of the connections they would or would not be engaging in and what they expect to come online.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon, for that. Thank you, Deputy Smith. And again, I hope you stay with us so that we can explore some of those questions in further detail.